Visit was filled with pageantry and kind words, but little tangible policy change in the relationship between the two superpowers. Key divisions remain, with China issuing a stark warning against further U.S. support of Taiwan. And the president did mention some wins from the trip, including new trade deals, but he gave little details about those deals. He was equally vague about any commitment from China with respect to Iran.
This has been an incredible visit. I think a lot of good has come of it. We've made some fantastic trade deals, great for both countries. He's a man I respect greatly, become really a friend. We did discuss Iran. We feel very similar to Iran. We want that to end. We don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. We want the straits open. We're closing it now. I mean, they closed it, then we closed it on top of them. But we want the straits open, and we want them to get it ended, because it's a crazy thing. They're a little bit crazy.
Now, President Trump met with Xi Jinping for their final closed-doors discussion at the symbolic headquarters of China's ruling Communist Party. Xi told reporters he chose the historic venue to return the kindness from when Trump invited him to Mar-a-Lago back in 2017. A little tit for tat there. In the Truth Social post from earlier in the day, President Trump attempted to clean up comments apparently made by Xi about the U.S. being a, quote, declining nation. He was insisting that the leader was talking about Joe Biden's time in office, not his. You can judge for yourself. Joining us live from Beijing is MS Now White House reporter Laura Barron-Lopez. Laura, the summit's over. It happened very fast. What wins, if any, did the U.S. get from the trip?
Sam, there were very little deliverable items from this trip, and what did come of it were things that were expected. So the president said that he thinks that Xi Jinping has agreed to purchase some 200 Boeing planes. That's something that we expected heading into this. And then the other thing was that Jamieson Greer just told Bloomberg, that's the United States trade representative, that he expects some billions in purchases of agriculture products, including soybeans, to be made over the course of the next 3 years, that he expects an agreement to come out soon between China and the U.S. on that. But again, that was expected as well. There seems to be no kind of deal made on computer chips, despite the fact that the president brought NVIDIA's CEO along with him, along with a number of other CEOs. And they said that the meetings went well when they came out of them, but they didn't announce anything. So, and then when it comes to Iran of it all, there appears to be very little in agreement or tangible deliverables in terms of China actually helping the United States ending that war and helping the United States reopen the Strait of Hormuz, Sam.
Laura, there's this kind of underlying tension throughout all this, where the president's calling Xi Jinping a friend, but at the same time, or I should also note that on Fox News, he talked about China holding U.S. farmland and Chinese students being allowed into American universities and how important it is for the country. And then at the same time, you have people in the administration who are posturing as China hawks. What does that say about sort of the current state of the U.S.-China relationship?
Yeah, I think you're referring to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is, a well-known China hawk and has tried to maintain that throughout being a part of this administration. All while President Trump, coming here was approaching China in a very different way than he did last year when he was launching this trade war with China, which, of course, ended in a truce towards the end of last year. And they've been trying to maintain that truce. But even very different compared to the president's first term, where the president's national security strategy during the first term talked about China as a geopolitical foe, and that's the way that Marco Rubio kind of still talks about China. But again, you hear very different things from the president. He is constantly praising and fawning over Xi Jinping and calling him a friend and describing him in ways that he does not describe the United States' closest allies.
All right, Laura, stick with us for a little bit. The Iran war was on the top of mind throughout this week's summit in Beijing. President Trump relayed to Fox News yesterday what he and Xi Jinping discussed when it comes to the conflict, as well as the Strait of Hormuz and nuclear weapons.
China's support of Iran. How big a discussion was that today?
We discussed it. I mean, when you say support, they're not fighting a war with us or anything.
No.
He said he's not going to give military equipment. That's a big statement. He said that today. That's a big statement. He said that strongly. But at the same time, he said, you know, they buy a lot of their oil there, and they'd like to keep doing that. He'd like to see Hormuz Strait opened. I said, well, we didn't stop it. They did it, and then we stopped them. You know, sort of interesting. He joked. He said, you know, it's sort of if they stopped it, then you stop them. But they'd like to see it opened. But they actually closed it. He didn't like the fact that they're charging tolls. I don't know if they are or not. I don't know who would pay them. I mean, where do they put the money? The country's decimated. You know, they're charging tolls. Where's the money going? I don't think China wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon either. I said, they're stone cold crazy. You don't need them having a nuclear weapon either.
What did he say? What did he say?
Well, he's not going to respond too much. He's a pretty cool guy. He's not going to say, "Oh, gee, that's a good point."
I think he might.
What's he going to do?
Well,
say,
I mean,
what a wonderful point.
You think he agreed?
Yeah, I think
that was the impression.
I don't think he wants them to have. No, he would like to see it end. But he's been good about it, you know. Hasn't done anything hostile.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave more insight on the diplomatic talks during an interview with NBC News.
The Chinese side said they are not in favor of militarizing the Straits of Hormuz, and they're not in favor of a tolling system. And that's our position. We will never support an Iranian tolling system in the Straits of Hormuz, nor do we think they have a right to put mines in international waters. And so it's good that we have alliance, or at least agreement on that point. I think the fundamental question is, what are we going to do about it? We have a resolution now before the United Nations in which 100 and something countries have co-signed. The Bahrainis are the sponsor, but we're strongly behind it and been pushing very hard on it. And it very clearly makes those points. So we hope the Chinese will vote for it. So right now we haven't gotten their commitment to vote for it yet at the United Nations. Maybe that'll change after today's meeting. I don't know.
Can you help me understand what exactly did President Trump ask President Xi for when it comes to Iran?
He didn't ask him for anything. I mean, we're not asking for China's help. We don't need their help.
But he raises the issue.
We raise the issue to make clear what our position is and to make it clear so they understand, because I mean, it's logical we would talk about it given how dominant that issue is. Our position is very clear. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And that's what they were, you know, they were on the verge of building a conventional capability where they had so many rockets, so many drones, that you couldn't do anything against them. They would hide behind that conventional shield to do whatever they wanted with their nuclear program in the future. That's why the president chose to act.
I want to bring back in Laura. So some of this is a little bit, doesn't pass the smell test. Why wouldn't we ask China for help with Iran, considering the ties between those two countries? Is it your understanding that it just didn't come up? And when you're talking to people in the administration, what do they say for why it didn't come up?
Well, Iran did come up. I mean, the White House made clear that even after that first bilateral meeting, that it was raised in the meeting. But the question is whether or not the president actually explicitly made asks. And based on Marco Rubio's statements, he didn't. Now, the president seems to feel as though Xi Jinping agrees with him on a number of fronts, although he did use the word that it was his impression that Xi Jinping doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He didn't say it was necessarily said explicitly. But it is stunning that, you know, if the president didn't very directly ask for help on Iran from China, it's striking because of the fact that when you talk to the president's allies, which I have done over the course of the last few days, people who are former Trump officials have said that if there was anything that could have come out of this summit that would have really helped the president back home, it would have been to get China to make real commitments on helping with reopening the Strait of Hormuz, on helping on getting Iran to the negotiating table. And the president is now returning home with bad poll numbers on the economy, with voters upset about the cost of gas prices, and he doesn't have any kind of commitment from China to reopen that, to help reopen that strait. And yet that's something that could have helped him get out of this economic and political mess of the president's own making.
Yeah, just very quickly on that point, because this is so geared around cost of living issues domestically for President Trump. just to recap, and maybe I'm missing something, they did not net a tangible trade agreement. They did maybe get some pledges to buy Boeing planes. They did not get any progress with respect to Iran, and they're saying that it really didn't come up in a tangible way. What are they crowing about, as you tend to do at the end of a trip like this? What are the things that they are very happy about?
It's really scattered, Sam, the way what they're saying that they got and what they are touting. The president said very broadly, we got trade deals. Wasn't specific about what those were, but what the administration has said is those Boeing planes and is the purchase of those agricultural goods. And again, those are things that were expected that also China needs. So there wasn't any big deal as far as we know so far from the people we've been talking to in terms of with those businesses, the more than a dozen or so CEOs that came along with the president. And the only thing that the president hinted at that maybe could have come out of the Iran talks with China was that he said that Xi Jinping agrees and potentially committed to not sending military equipment to Iran. But again, there were no specifics there, and so it's unclear how real that actually is.
Okay. MS Now White House reporter Laura Barron Lopez. Thank you so much, Laura. Really appreciate it. Live from Beijing.